Welcome to Narratives in Black, the show where we deep dive into the journeys of Black creatives shaping culture, breaking barriers, and even leaving a legacy. I'm your host, Amanda Shea, and today we've got a special guest in the chair, someone whose fingerprints are all over the music and entertainment industries, even if you didn't realize it. He's an Emmy-nominated, platinum-selling composer, producer, and engineer. His work has been heard in national ad campaigns, film, and television with brands like Bose, Bank of America, and the NFL tapping into his sound. From his early days as a shy kid discovering music to touring the world and producing for major artists, he's built a career that blends artistry with advocacy. As the founder of Real Sync Music, he's not just crafting soundtracks, he's creating opportunities. He's a voting member of the Recording Academy and is a fierce advocate for diversity in the entertainment industry. Whether it's composing for Showtime Films, mentoring young talent, or leading initiatives, he's using his platform to make sure the next generation of Black creatives has a seat at the table. So without further ado, please welcome Malik Williams. Hi. Welcome to Narratives in Black.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome so much.
I was excited to be here. I was excited to be here.
Excited to have you. I'm always interested in people who are seeing the podcast and watching it in tandem and then being like, I may want to actually be on the podcast. So we thank you and we're honored that you wanted to even join us.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think your story is really interesting and a lot of people don't know who you are, but we see a lot of you, especially on the internet. You know, you're always the one popping into photos with all these people. So it's really good to have you sitting in this chair and being able to interview you personally. So welcome.
Thank you.
I'm going to go right into your questions because I'm really curious on where this all began, right? Like, I know your journey now, and I also know some of your future plans. But for the audience at home, you've mentioned to me behind scenes that your early exposure to music was what shaped by your parents and your other siblings, with influences ranging from like Al Green to U2, which is an interesting range of music, right? Can you share a specific moment from your childhood where music truly captivated you?
Yeah, I was probably 4 or 5 years old.
Wow.
When my father used to make me sing Al Green songs.
I love that. What's your favorite?
Probably For the Good Times.
Okay,
maybe.
that's a deep
one of
cut.
those, yeah. There's so many just on repeat. And even now, I still listen to a lot of that music. And then coming up and not really understand what that was, like vocal ability and things like that. I didn't really understand that. Not until I was probably 10, 11, 12. A lot of my siblings, played music as well. They went to Dorchester High, so they had a really great music program there. So we always had bands at the house and instruments and everything else with my brother that's older than me, but I was still 10 or 11 years old, so I wasn't supposed to touch their stuff or nothing like that. But that's how I got into it, because I did touch their stuff.
Was your dad a musician?
He was in the Army, and so I think he, was involved with music there. He played guitar. Nothing professionally though, we had an organ and pianos at the house and things like that. But again, I was really young, so it's don't touch kinda, And also I got into other things, just martial arts and other things of my own personal interest. So I wasn't doing that, at that time. And it wasn't until later on in my teen years, my later teen years, that I started kind of songwriting, singing, that kind of thing, just kind of being more around other creative people.
Wow, 4 or 5 years old is really young.
Yeah.
What was your mom's influence on your musical career?
She sang as well, opera.
Wow.
And she taught me how to pirouette.
Okay.
So she did ballet.
Okay.
So I was a silly kid, again, in my young teens, doing all of these things, singing. My vocal range was mini Rippleton to all the way down, right? And so being able to exercise these things, but not knowing that I was doing it to aggravate my sisters. I had 6 sisters, so it was probably 4 of them older than me at that time. But that's what I was doing, being annoying, but not realizing, what I was doing, what I was exercising at that time, it was all just fun, mimicking other people, mimicking female vocalist and male vocalist and all that, and all the little quirky things in between, accents and stuff like that.
So you listen to music.
Yeah, it's almost like, mimicking and emulating someone else. And that developed certain ability for myself, even later on, starting recording, when you're doing background vocals and then you have all of these different textures of vocals happening. Right?
Layering, if you will.
Layering, right, from, every textural sound that you want to get. And a lot of that has to do with how you use your voice as well. So it's not just like I'm a tenor and I sing this way, or soprano, I sing that way. It's like, how do you use all of those textures, to actually create the sound that you want?
That's beautiful. Yeah. Really good singers always say, or really good vocalists that I admire, every interview that I've seen, they've always said that they've sung every single day and they've sung different types of songs, whether or not it was in their vocal range, just so that they could have that practice. Because your voice is an instrument. A lot of us don't realize that the vocals are your own personal instrumentation. So to be able to sing alto, tenor, soprano, even having your head voice, it takes a lot of practice. And it sounds like even though you were trying to be annoying, it definitely helped with your experience and what you do now. Yeah. Were there any non-musical influences in your life, or people that inspired you to get into music that maybe weren't in music?
Really, I'm a diehard crazy Prince fan. Most people know that about me.
Legend.
But it's the same thing though. It's really being in awe. I didn't like Prince at all because all the girls like Prince.
It's
we
giving hater at a child's age.
We talked about that, right?
Yeah.
No, but you kind of can't deny his musicianship, right?
Right.
So as I started realizing, again, that was when I was young, 12, 13, 14, 15. Well, all of a sudden when I started playing music, now all of a sudden I'm listening differently, as a creative person, multi-instrumentalist, all that. So that's kind of how I came up. So, and I started out as a bass player because I wasn't supposed to touch those instruments in our den. But there was a bass there and I used to pick it up. But honestly, how I started learning how to do any of this stuff, we used to be so bad in the summertime as kids, right? So we'd be on punishment, right? Grounded all summer. I was lucky if I can get to the porch. And so I used to be seriously on lockdown in my room, and there was a guitar in this closet. It was an old guitar, and it only had 4 strings on it. And I didn't know that it was supposed to have 6. I just didn't think about that. And so I used to learn every song off the radio. My ears are really good.
Wow.
So I ended up learning inadvertently how to play the bass, by playing with that guitar. So when we ended up having instruments in the house, my brother's friends, and I ended up, this one guy in particular used to always leave his bass there, and I used to go in there and just play around with his bass, and he was cool. He was yeah, man, go ahead, And most musicians, and they find out somebody's interested, they're gonna all go, and make sure they're yeah, come on, come do it. So that's what I did, and then later on ended up being in bands and things like that.
Wow.
As a bass player first, bass player vocalist first.
So you are the definition of playing by ear. Do you read music as well?
I'm forced to sometimes,
Okay.
but no, I've actually never had a formal music class in my life.
Wow.
And so, but I kind of grew up again, being in bands, you're learning from other people, getting into production. Now, we went from analog to digital and, programming, synths and all these different things we do, or even programming, drums, beats.
Yeah.
And so understanding what are these little symbols that I had to figure out, all the timing and everything like that. So I end up learning inadvertently that way. Even, delay times, if you hear an echo or a delay, that was back in the day with slide rules. It's almost like what a slide rule is in a way, but we had to calculate that. So,
wow.
And I have an engineering background. So I always thought that I was gonna be an architect or something like that from middle school into high school. I went to Wentworth for architectural and mechanical engineering. So by having that kind of my brain, that part of my brain that worked that way as an engineer, all that harsh, calculating, frustrating stuff was fun. And to figure out all I gotta do is do this math problem, and then it's gonna tell me what my delay time is for whatever that tempo is. So those are the things there I look at, I'm wow, now we're just turn it on, computers, and it's just doing it. We're not even thinking about where it comes from. But that's why I do education stuff and I share these things with younger people. It kind of dates me a little bit, but it's all good.
But it gives you so much experience, though. It's like, I think the history of how we've done things is important, right? Because like, in order for you to understand how fast and how easy it is to be in a digital era, you kind of need to know what the analog era was. I remember things being on 8 tracks and cassettes and CDs. So some of these babies that you are like literally teaching have no idea what some of those things are, or even records. It's like a lost art, if you will.
Yeah, and a lot, when I first started recording, it was a 4-track machine, again, and that was innovative at that time, and we just played the whole bass line through, played the whole keyboard part through, sang all the vocals, and as well, like now you think about singing all these background vocals. I remember when I got my first 8-track recording on cassette thing, right? And you had like SMPTE, it's like technically ways to lock up tape with other apparatus that you might have, right? So doing that and recording like 30 tracks of vocals with an 8-track and bouncing back and forth, which meant all of those mixes had to be right, or you're grouping things a certain way, to do that when you only have 8 tracks and 1 track is taken up by a time code. So 7 tracks of doing that. And that's actually the first stuff I ever got placed like on TV shows and all the rest of that. And nobody knows the process of how I did it. And I still listen to it now. I'm like, oh, that's not too bad, like in today's 2025 years.
So right? It aged well is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, production is production, as long as it's clean and it's tight and everything else. It's like listening to an old record, right? Yeah. You listen to an old record and, you can tell sonically it's not, as wide, let's say, but is it a good recording? Is it a good mix? So I've always been proud of that.
It's interesting because some songs that I listen to, even on like streaming platforms, they sound so low.
Yeah.
Because back then they used different recording materials, right? And now when we're hearing it on a digital platform, it kind of like compresses the sound. It's almost like when you're on Instagram and you post a picture and it compresses a little bit because maybe you got it sent from like an Android.
Yeah, and that's all on purpose. So like when you're mixing, if I mix for broadcast for a TV show, it's one output level, LUFS it's called. Or if I mix for a record, right? A lot of times you just want to hear it, you want to feel that record or whatever. Is that going to be appropriate for when it goes to Spotify and Apple and everything else? Right. Or is it going to match up? So let's say like you're watching YouTube and you get one video that comes from you and another artist or whatever we're watching, right? Whatever content we're watching. And then in between there's commercials that are happening, right? We see commercials pop up. Can you imagine listening to that and all of a sudden the volume's really high and really low and really high and all over the place and you're running back in the room when you step out because something else starts playing. Right. So that's what we have to be mindful of when we're exporting something. Where is that volume at, right? And so this is another thing that a lot of people don't really talk about, but if you get into broadcast, if you work for a station or anything like that, or just a mix engineer, you got to know like, okay, I'm mixing for this platform and what does that output need to be? So. Yeah,
continuity across all platforms is really important. Yeah. It's like listening to it on the TV, but then, we all say, especially artists, we all say the car is the best place to listen to anything new, right? Because the speakers are just set up different. But you can,
totally.
But you can hear it, and you can also hear the panning between the speakers. And like, if the engineer did a really good job, you don't hear any type of lower volume or higher volume. But if they need to do some work, you'll definitely hear that in the car.
Oh yeah, and we did that religiously, right? Make a mix, go outside with a cassette. Make a mix, go outside with your little drive, or make a CD, right? And the evolution of that.
Right.
But what it is, it's a space that you know what sounds like in that space, right? From record to record that you play. So if you do your mix and it sounds cool in the car, or in my studio, I have my regular monitors. And then I always used to have back in the day like these little realistic Radio Shack speakers. If you guys remember Radio
Shack, wow.
Right? So, and I still have smaller speakers, and what that is, that reference is like a boombox back in the day, or a cheap radio that you would play your record on. And so by mixing with that and getting a reference between that is what it tells me. Then if it makes it to the car, I mix on headphones a lot. And now they have like binaural mixes and things like that you can do for immersive audio mixing and, you know, Dolby Atmos and all these other things on a technical level. But I just, again, you got to trust your ears. And
Yeah.
I share this all the time because people are like, oh, I can't afford these speakers or whatever. Like, no, no, no. You just got to know what you're mixing and figure out what you need, what it should sound like. And on those really crappy speakers you have, you'll figure that out in that room, regardless of what that room is. You don't have to have thousands of dollars to like have a treated room. We all aspire to that, right? But at the end of the day, you just want to have a good mix. So if you just got your headphones and you know what that sounds like and you teach yourself, you know, you learn it, you're learning what you know, what the environment is. So anyways, we can go on forever with that, but that's...
Oh, with music all day.
Yeah.
Like I'm geek squad when it comes to the equipment, when it comes to just sonically, how do you make a track and like what does that sound like once it's actually produced? Because I actually love the process of creating more than sometimes I love the final product. Yeah. You named that you've spoken about being shy as a kid despite singing at like 4 years old. Yeah. How did that shyness evolve over time, and was there like a turning point that like helped you overcome it?
Yeah, so when I was little, when I was like 5 on this speaker, this amplifier that I still remember, and crying because I didn't want to do it, that was really just like showboating for my family, my aunts and uncles or whoever came by. I didn't have any passion behind what it was as an artist. As I got older and I started learning what I was doing, right, as an art, then I think more of the passion behind, or the confidence behind what I was doing. I never was some cocky kid showing up in a room. On stage, it's different, right?
Right.
So as a lot of people are like, you know, imagine everyone in the audience has no clothes on. You ever hear people say that?
Yep, envision everybody naked.
Yeah, I got to the point when we were playing in bands that I was like, they all wish they were doing what I'm doing right now. Mm-hmm. But I was still modest about that, but it's like it's like you're up there, you're having fun, you're feeling good about what you're doing and confidently. And I imagine like a lot of artists on stage kind of feel that way. You know, I still get nervous every time I step on a stage, you know, every time I'm doing anything, but it's like, you know, as soon as that first song starts or whatever, and I'm famous for not learning songs if I go and jump in with some of my friends that I play with or whatever, but, you know, my ears are good, right? So I can actually just figure out by the time they get past that first verse or something, you know, 4 bars in and I can figure it out, then I get it, and then it becomes like fun, you know, you'll see me concentrating. Or back in the day, I used to keep my headphones in my ears learning songs before I jump on stage. But no, like that confidence of being there and the community, the camaraderie between the people that you're playing with a lot of times really is what it is. You know, I can look at you. If we were on stage and be, you know, that energy that you get from each other, that's something that you kind of can't explain what that is until you're doing it. Right. And that can happen in any aspect of life, whatever somebody's passion is. You know, you get around, and that's why the arts is so important, right? That's why music in particular, but the arts itself. I remember when I told you, like, I kind of forgot what it felt like to be an artist because I'm doing so much advocacy and everything else that I'm doing. So I needed to get back to a balance, because most people don't know I'm a singer. They don't know that I'm a musician. They don't, you know, in 2025, and if it's 10 years ago, it would have been different. I would have been on stage or showing up with my guitar somewhere, mostly just for fun or people that I was producing music with. But it's kind of like that feeling of like, you can't replace that at all. You know, it's like being in a room with other artists and vibing with someone. It's kind of a priceless feeling, and it's the why behind why we do what we do.
Absolutely. So. And I think like there's a couple things that you said that I think are super important to hold on to. The nervousness is the passion, right? Like if we didn't care about what we were doing, then we wouldn't get nervous. I think it's the care, the love, and the also like paying homage to like all of the greats that came before us. Like when we take center stage, it is now on us to not only bring up the vibes with that audience, but also show ourselves within that moment, right? Yeah. You're right about not being able to describe what that feeling is when you look over at your bandmate, or you look over at your BGVs and you're like, it's this kind of like magical moment between you all, like, wow, we're really here and we're doing what we love type.
Yeah.
And you can't really put words to it. But when that chemistry is undeniable, it makes the experience that much better, not just for yourself and everybody else you're playing with, but for the audience too. They can
Yeah.
feel that.
The audience, I was gonna say the audience, you can connect with people. And I'm a people person, so I like to connect with people in general. But it's that feeling that you get when you're like, look at someone and they smile back at you,
Yeah.
Like that feeling is like, oh shoot, like, okay, But again, like, it's a job. It's like, okay, we're doing this thing. So it's not about entertaining people per se. It's about, having fun and doing what we do, best.
Being a vibe curator.
Yeah.
Music has a way of shaping people during their most critical years. Was there a particular song or album, since we're talking about music and the feel of it? Prince is one of probably the perfect examples of where you can literally put on his record and just feel every single track. Was there like a particular album that felt like it was a soundtrack to your youth? I know.
No, but I was deeply into Prince stuff regardless of what was going on, like a Love Sexy. You remember Love Sexy record?
Yes.
There was
yes.
no tags in between the songs. So if you put that on a CD, you had to listen to the whole thing.
Absolutely.
And I remember like I rigged up my motorcycle, because I'm technical, and rigged it up so I can have, and this is back in the day, I had audio in my helmet. And I used to just go for a ride and everything else. And again, it's just like you're in that space and you have this music in that space. It's like being in any room with a nice sound system or whatever. So that's what my motorcycle was to me, and it still is till today. My motorcycle is still rigged up with, with speakers in my helmet, right?
I love that.
And just, going out and driving, but the same as a car. My car always had, even if my sound system in my car was worth more than my car back in the day, which is probably typical, right? For us, like feeling happy, proud to finally get a car, and it's like, all right, now I need sound, So like a lot of like Love Sexy, Sign of the Times, now fast forwarding, sometimes it snows in April because I lost two of my brothers. I don't know if we talked about that, but some people that know me.
Sorry,
because I do a lot of mental health advocacy and suicide awareness advocacy. But I remember listening to that song back then, and when he's talking about Tracy died, right? And then when my little brother passed away, I'm not like an outwardly emotional person. You won't read about this on my social media. You will see me at suicide awareness events, especially more the last few years. And I talk about it. I talk about it a lot because I know what I did to deal with that. Two of my brothers died. 30 days later after that first brother died, my brother got me into music died. So dealing with a lot of that stuff, I've always just kind of had a way, and I've done a lot of work with myself, right? Every book, every doctor, every YouTube video I've watched over the years when I never told anyone I was doing it, And I remember when I was working with Jordan Knight from New Kids. And I remember walking in his house and seeing books on his coffee table. And I'm like, whoa, bro, I read those books, all these self-help books.
Yeah.
And so for lunchtime, we used to literally just go to the bookstore. He lived in Prudential. We'd go to Barnes and Nobles, and I'd go straight to the self-help section. But I always loved psychology, like in school and everything else. And even as a writer, like I loved literary arts and then psychology and things like that to express myself, but I found myself really gravitating towards that from a mental health standpoint. And then in life, dealing with divorce, dealing with death, and all these different things. And growing up in community, we deal with death, it's way too normal, right?
Yeah.
And so
sometimes desensitized.
Yeah, so like I use my platforms, and this is where the arts comes in, right? As artists, we create based off our emotional state on any given day, right? Whether we're happy or sad. And we also have this unique ability to create that story, even if we don't feel that way, right? So we're good storytellers as cloaking, but, and this is why I talk about it out loud a lot now, because this is why it's so important to talk about these things, because people look at us as artists and be like, oh my God, you got it together. Like, nah, I got problems. And listen, matter of fact, let me share with you some of my problems.
We still getting it together.
Yeah, but it's also like, well, not just here, let me dump this on you, but let me share what I've been through, especially with younger people in particular, and let me share with you how I overcame that, or how I still, kind of sustain in a certain emotional state, whatever that is. Every day is going to be different, right? But a lot of artists, we think it's okay to feel that way. It's okay to feel despair and depression and everything else. Like, it's normal. If I'm going to be an artist, I'm going to have to go through this until I make it, right? Versus understanding, no, you're not supposed to feel that way. You're supposed to be happy, But nobody talks about it like that, right? And so people look at it and be like, oh, you need health care because when you get, sick, you go to the hospital. It's like, what about the awareness of how you feel and understanding that, oh, shoot, if I start feeling this way, maybe I should talk to somebody about it, or that kind of thing, and have that be normal, to be like, today I just don't feel so great. Regardless of what industry you're in, that's everyone's reality as a human being. As artists, though, it's like we have a responsibility to keep going and keep doing what we do despite how we feel.
Right.
And then we see other people that are doing these amazing things and not really knowing their story and realize that they were propped up or they were a plant, like Cat Williams says, right?
We hear
like
that
all
all the
these
time.
things that could be someone's reality. So it's not a contest where you want to put one up against the other, but it's just the awareness of like, how do I feel? Everyone's reality is different,
Right.
So
I think that's the beauty of music, and you're right, as far as like the arts being super important. We all need a way of expressing and emoting our feelings and like the things that we're going through. Also, that makes us really good storytellers in the long scheme of things, because in the large scheme of things, because we're telling our own stories, we're speaking on our truths, right? The one thing, like, regardless of sexual orientation, race, religious beliefs, at the end of the day, we all understand emotions.
Yeah.
Everybody and they mama understand what sadness, despair, anger, heartbreak feels like, grief feels like. And I think that music and art are those ways of like us emoting that out to a bigger audience so that they can feel seen and heard and also represented in that. But also it's a form of therapy for artists, for us to be able to get that out of our body and get that out of our spirit, to be able to share it with other people, regardless of what that feedback looks like, is super therapeutic.
Yeah.
So it makes sense why you were really into like psychology and all of the other mediums that go into it, because I think that is what makes really great artists, right? Is that when we sit here and we do that education behind all of it and not just the music. I'm actually really surprised that you didn't go to like Berkeley or something, considering your resume, which I really kind of like love to hear the fact that you didn't, like, to go to Wentworth and be an engineer, and you being a Emmy nominated, but now Emmy award winning musician, composer, like engineer, is really cool to hear. And another thing, what I really love about your journey too, is I didn't realize you didn't read music. The fact that you're reliant on your ear. I think sometimes, especially living in a city like Boston, where some things feel very elitist in some ways, like, oh, well, this makes you an upper echelon artist if you have X, Y, and Z, or you've been to this school, or the technical side of things, when you could just be naturally gifted.
Yeah, I mean, I found ways to work around it because different professional situations. I remember, Kenny Loggins, if you remember him. So I was a part of his choir when he came here, regionally. And I remember showing up to rehearsal, and the MD, the musical director, gives us all the charts and everything else. I'm like, what is this? What am I gonna do with this? But it's not like I don't know how to read. It's just not my thing. It's not my first go-to, whatever, because my ears. In this case, and I'm like, oh my God, I got referred and recommended by an actual vocal teacher that teaches music and teaches vocals, who knew, had worked with me in studios and knew that I was a singer and everything else. But what I did is I brought my computer and I recorded the whole first rehearsal. And so I went back and I just studied what I heard versus what I read on that paper on the charts. And then I knew, and this is, I guess, a part of a gift, like if anyone does harmonies and things like that, it's like a scale that's already in your head, regardless of what key that song's in. You know what notes work or not. Before you open your mouth and say that note, I know what note, because I'm hearing it in my head already. So that's what I was able to do, and I ended up doing that whole thing. Now, by the time I did that little exercise, then I can look at the sheet music and be like, okay, this is where it's going. Then I can follow along with the rest of the choir. But those are the kind of things that I learned, or a client showing up and saying, hey, I got this song I want you to produce, and here's the sheet music. And I'm like, oh, okay, let me see what this is, right? But then all of a sudden I calm down and I'm like, all right, I see where this is going or whatever. Let me just play these keys and these chords or whatever and get over it. And then all of a sudden I feel good that I'm like, I don't know why I stressed out about that, right? It's just that like when I first started doing it, you know, like I have no patience in some cases, where I remember buying this music theory book and they're like, name the white keys, you know? I'm like, by the time I do that, I could have had the song done, you know?
Right.
Or somebody saying like, you know, what key did you write that song in? I'm like, the black ones. Like, that's what I did, it was the black ones, which is how you can write songs. But anyways, I realized also in a professional setting, with every record company that I've, you know, worked with, a studio I've been in, a lot of people, big people that we know of now don't read, you know? I think maybe, I don't know if it's Lionel Richie or Smokey Robinson or one of those guys, never read music or at all, you know?
And so the technical term is what, sheet music, right?
Yeah, I'm just, you know, reading music is just reading music regardless of what instrument you're playing, right? But a lot of these people didn't do that, and I realized a lot of the big songs you see on the radio, you hear on the radio, a lot of those people that are producing or writing those songs in particular don't know how to read music. They're the songwriters, right? And so it's not this thing that music or writing a song or producing a song doesn't have to be this unsurmountable task, right? I'm proof of that. But when my sons got into playing music, all of a sudden nobody knew that I was even in the music industry at all. And I showed up and I'm like, this is like a baby book. I'm never gonna open up that baby book and learn English, right?
Right.
So now I have an opportunity to sit and just be quiet and absorb and try to figure out what's the things that I should have learned that I probably would have never had an opportunity to learn. So that's kind of like that's how I look at it now. It's definitely important, and it's a tool that is going to be very useful for anyone that's able to learn, of course.
Aside from like musicians and like obviously collaborating with so many different people, actually we should name some of those people, because you named Jordan Knight. What was your role in New Kids on the Block?
So I worked with Jordan post New Kids when Jordan had his solo career. And originally I got hired when we used to go to the bookstore thing. He just hired me on salary every week to just show up. And it started out by me seeing him in a club and like, hey man, I'm not working with you. And you know, show up to the studio with my bass, and that's what I ended up doing like the very next day. And then that went from studio recording stuff to me setting up production studios in his house, in different houses that he moved to, and just being on salary every week, you know. And then I ended up going to Atlanta. I ended up going to MCA Records, sent me to Atlanta with Bobby Brown at Triple B Studios. But Bobby's my cousin. And so I had to call my uncle and be like, yo, I'm gonna show up to this thing, like, you know, because they were gonna put us up in his house and everything else. I was like, I can't show up without calling ahead. So I ended up doing that. And then while I was there for a little while, Jordan's manager called me back and said, hey, do you want to go on this tour? We need a production manager for this world tour. So I ended up doing that. So, you know, I came back, ended up going on the road with him and everything else. And so that's kind of a big part of that.